So I'm really excited to share this thesis with you. This was something that I got from my birthing instructor when I was pregnant with my first, and I was so amazed by how thoughtful this document was. And I'll kind of show you and walk you through what I found really interesting, and we're going to start with the very beginning of life, so those first 4 to 6 weeks of life and kind of what to think about and how it was helpful. So there's this brain development and overview section. So if you're interested in kind of how the brain is forming and what's happening neurologically, it's really interesting. I'm going to actually skip over that part and get into the like what to do with your baby, how to think about your baby at this age. And I think one of the things that is so hard that I did perfectly with my first, almost perfectly, and I just completely could not do for my second or my third, is keeping this really soft environment. So soft light, not loud jumbled noises. The science shows that a baby who receives stimulation at just one sense at a time takes in learning so much better than a baby who's getting like brighter lights and some noise. Their little brains can't handle all the stimulation, they shut down. So they talk about, in the beginning, the author talks about protecting them from excessive, unhelpful noises, like siblings, like coming in and screaming or playing loudly. So it's really hard to do with the second and third, but for your first, sometimes you can make that possible. And I do remember the lights needing to be really quite dim, dimmer than you might think, quite dark in the room. Because when I did that, and when I turned the lights down like really pretty dark, I noticed that my baby would their eyes just opened up and they became alert, especially if I wasn't saying anything. And I just gave them the ability to just scan the room. We had a fan, babies love fans. So remember my little guy, Leland, would always just stare and look at the fan, but you'll notice that your baby will really kind of wake up to the world. A newborn will truly wake up to the world if you give them the right environment and help keep those noises and that stimulation down. So dimming the lights, responding quickly to crying, of course, handling them gently, of course. And then what I found really interesting was noticing, I don't know if you guys have noticed that your baby's eyes cross in the beginning, but my baby's eyes would cross. And I noticed that the more I would give them exercises to develop their eyes, that they actually started to track together instead of, crossing. And so one of the things that you can do that I do remember doing, which was really interesting, was to have the lights dim and then turn up the lights. If you have like a dimmer, you can turn up the lights, and you'll notice that your baby's pupils will constrict when the light is obviously more, and will expand when the light is less. And so giving your baby the practice for that pulmonary response to develop in reaction to light is a really helpful thing in growing their eyes and their ability to see. And so this is a little what you can do on page 45. It's really interesting because it talks about like observing that pulmonary response. I thought that was really interesting. And then synchronization, so having the eyes work together to track something. And that's when I had said, the baby's eyes will cross, and you can show them these really simple black and white images. So start out with images that are the simplest, that look like really simple for you, and then you can move to images that are more complex, like this classic checkerboard or these stripes. These are just baby's favorite. They will look at this for a lot of seconds, like maybe even minutes. So start with the simple and then move to the complex. And what you want to do is show your baby the images really slowly and see if their eyes will track. So it's about this fast. You want to show an image to your baby. You don't want to kind of like flip over the images. I've seen lots of parents kind of like do this, and you want to just give them kind of this slow ability to track and see if their eyes will follow the black and white images. You can also, they had this in the thesis. They talked about this flashlight and putting different little attachments to the flashlight. You know, I have to say I didn't do that. It didn't really register for me as well. I found it a little bit tricky to find the flashlight and tape the black and white things to the flashlight, but yeah, that's really interesting. Another thing to think about is their skin. So their skin is, one of the biggest, it's our biggest organ in our bodies, and it's a place of a lot of learning. And so hospital time, you often think about skin on skin at the hospital, but making time for skin on skin at home can be really hard in those first few weeks, but it's actually so important. So I remember making sure that I was warm and had a blanket, but really kind of taking the time to not have visitors and to just be skin on skin with my baby was so important in the beginning. And then of course, like speaking to them. So speaking to them frequently in kind of like a softer voice, but giving them lots of language. They are listening. And even though they obviously aren't understanding what you're saying yet, they're picking up the intonations of language at this age. And verbal exposure is so healthy for them. So I try not to speak to them while I'm showing them the black and white images, because I want them to be able to focus on one sense at a time. But if I'm just looking at them or they're looking at me, I will take time to speak to them. So this is giving them, speaking slowly and otherwise naturally, making sure that you're protecting them from intense sounds, doing and protecting them from like quick changes in temperature, and making sure that you're giving them lots of kind of visual stimulation is where it's at in these first like 4 to 6 weeks. So enjoy. This baby is so sweet, and they won't be this age for very long, so soak it all up.